Hello and welcome to episode 72 of the Boot Nerds podcast. JayMike, what's going on?
I am good as always, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great because today we're going to be talking about what, according to the Boot Nerds fan base, is our favorite brand by a long shot, which is, of course, Mizuno.
And they just dropped a new, dropped two new boots, actually. They just dropped the Morelia Neo III Beta, as this is called. And they also dropped this bad boy. So the Mizuno Morelia 2, or the Mizuno Morelia 0, I guess it's just called, which is a remake kind of the first Morelia they ever made. Says Run Bird on the heel, which is nice. And it's a very nice, just classic throwback, basically. We're not going to talk too much about this other than the fact that this is just an example of that slipper-like Mizuno OG quality of it feels really good on your feet. But my main point of interest today is going to be the new Neo 3. Because God knows we've been waiting 4 years to get a new Neo. And now they've finally given it to us. And it's changed, I would say, quite a lot. It might not look like it. Of course, there is the beta knit sock color and you know, then there's a lot of other stuff going on. So I'm thinking that we kind of just talk through all the new tech innovations. We can talk a little bit about the differences in fit, and also just maybe discuss the evolution of the Morelia and where the Morelia might be going in the future. Of course, also there's going to be a Q&A session later in the video. So if you have any questions you'd like us to answer in a later video, you can leave them in the comment section right down below. And of course, we'd also love to hear what you actually think of the new Neo 3 Japan betas, as these are called. But Josh, first impression on these?
Well, you said we've been waiting for 4 years for this boot. And that is partially accurate, because I would argue we've been waiting 10 years for this boot. Fair enough. Because Morelia Neo came out in 2010. Neo 2 was a very subtle refresh.
It was.
Very subtle. It wasn't until Neo 2 Beta that I think we genuinely got some interesting, or I guess significant variation on the Neo 2. And what I think is very cool about the Neo 3 Beta is, while it's similar in a lot of ways, I think it's a way of improving a football boot that actually makes sense, where it seems like all the changes they made were changes that were genuinely an attempt to improve on what they had done before, which is what we don't see that much in the football boot industry. Usually it's like, oh, here's something new and it's completely different than what we were doing before. And there's some contradiction in that over time, where Mizuno clearly believes, hey, this is a very good core concept that we have. Let's try and improve upon that in very little ways. So we're not destroying what the boot originally stood for, but we're also improving it in the long term.
Exactly. And that's actually, it's funny because that is exactly what has happened with this. Now, they set out to make it the ultimate barefoot feel when they tried to go about it. So they basically just sat down, took the Neo 2 betas and the regular Neo 2 Japans, and then they just said, okay, how can we make it more barefoot? So obviously the most important thing that the people might not realize is that they updated the last. So we've talked about previously how the Neo 2s were relatively they had a very low volume toe box, and to a lot of people that was a little bit of a problem. I know you talked about some squeezing and stuff, but they actually changed the last to give more room and make the volume of the toe box higher. So it's simply, there's more space for your toes. And while it's a little bit counterintuitive maybe to say that, okay, we give you a higher toe box, but it's going to make the boot feel more barefoot. Like, actually, I understand where they're going, because you know, the less restrictions you have while still getting a tight fit, the more free and barefoot-like it might end up feeling. So that's pretty wicked.
Yeah, can I just comment on that? Because, yeah, you're right. It doesn't seem like it would make sense to add volume to make the boot feel more barefoot. But if you really think about it, if you were genuinely playing barefoot, your foot is not squeezed into this cramped position. It's it's kind of spreading itself a little bit as you're planting and as you're moving, right? So you're right. There's a freedom aspect to not having your foot squeezed in one shape that's going to allow for it to move and flex and make contact with the ball in a different way than it otherwise would. And obviously, there are very popular football boots that squeeze your feet, like the Nike Mercurial. It's kind of built its name and popularity on squeezing feet. Let's be honest. But I know that the Morelia Neo line kind of is the speed boot offering from the Mizuno brand, and those two boots are technically competitors, but they achieve the speed boot feel or the speed boot experience, I think, in very, very different ways where they're difficult to compare. You kind of just want one or the other. I don't think that there's a lot of like middle ground between those two. Like what I'm picturing in my head, you know those like circle charts where you have like two giant circles and then there's like that intersecting part in the middle. I'm not sure that there's that many people in the middle that are like, oh, I really like the Neo 2, the Neo 3, and I also really like the Mercurial. You're kind of on one side or the other.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, I think a lot of people wearing the Mercurial would be able to go into the Morelia and think, wow, this gives me more or less everything I love from the Mercurial, but in a much more comfortable, elegant leather-like way. Of course, there's other compromises in terms of lockdown and, aggressive responsiveness in general, but I think they would be, they're closer than, let's say, the Tiempo and the Mercurial, obviously, because that makes sense. But I really like the fit of the new toe box. You actually feel like it's been designed for toes rather than just, being super low and pointy and just... I love low pointy toe boxes, don't get me wrong, but this feels more free and comfortable, I'm going to say. And the leather is, of course, still ridiculously soft. So no issues there. Moving on to the midfoot, this is where they've really taken inspiration from the Betas, and they've gone with this mesh textile package. Basically, it's super thin, really saves a lot of weight, but it still manages to have a solid amount of structural integrity because of the Mizuno Runbird logo here. So it's nice. It's very close to the ball, like was really good in the Betas, but it still has that. It still has the stability from the two, but without having that synthetic leather like we saw on the regular two. So pretty nice. And also, it's going to give you that feel of the Beta that I know you loved it way more than the regular twos, right?
Yeah, for me, with the regular Neo 1 and Neo 2, if I'm being honest, I just found that the combination of shape, low volume, felt very cramped in the toe box area for me, even once broken in. And then the midfoot material used, that synthetic leather, it wasn't a very forgiving material. It's not that it was overly stiff, but it was very strong. So it wouldn't stretch all that much. And when you tied the boots tight, it squeezed my foot a little bit more than I would have liked it to. And given that I'm slightly flat footed, it was more, not that the boots were unwearable for me, but it was not as comfortable as I wanted them to be. Where when I tried the Neo 2 Beta, having this slightly more flexible, slightly more forgiving textile upper, not as responsive as that synthetic, I would say, but it made for a much more comfortable experience. And I felt like the boot wrapped my foot a lot cleaner. And I get that sensation with the new Neo 3 as well. So I'm really glad that that's an element that carried over from the Neo 2 Beta. Because again, we raved about that boot. It was very expensive. Not that these are not expensive either, but it was a limited boot. So a lot of people couldn't get their hands on them. So I'm glad that now on a regular Mizuno release, people have access to try how good and how natural a tight-fitting speed boot can actually feel, because I think that's what this material really does well.
Exactly, and yes, it's 300 euros, so it's not like we've seen more expensive boots in the past, and I definitely say for what you get, the quality of a made in Japan boot, it's not ridiculous. But I agree in saying when you say that. And it's a very good point that, the Beta was limited. It was rather special. But here they take what was nice about the Beta and they kind of make it a little bit more accessible. They make it slightly more stable, a little bit more plush in the forefoot. So it kind of makes it more, should we say, I'm not going to say generally available. That's the wrong word. But they make it a bit more accessible to wear on day-to-day general basis to more people. I think it spreads out the appeal of the Beta to more people. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Right. So what they also did in making it more barefoot, what they sat down and looked at was the whole transition from boot to foot. And obviously we've seen a lot of knitted colors come out. So Mizuno looked at, okay, this as you said, this relatively hard synthetic leather that had the transition you got from the boot to your foot was a little abrupt. And I felt that when, especially on my support leg, when I planted it and, I tend to, bend it a little bit, so the boot actually scraped a bit and squeezed a bit into my lower ankle, and it wasn't entirely comfortable because it was a very hard material. What they've done here is to kind of eliminate that. So they've made the entire, should we say, the entire transition from the part where the boot transitions into your foot, that has been made in knit now. So even the heel tab is now made of knit. You still get that proper OG Morelia fit, but it's actually made out of knit. And for me, I really like it because you don't notice it as much when you plant your support foot and you shoot. There's less pain. There's less. You get less of a punishment when you really stress. You're in stressful positions when you put your foot down. That's very nice, and obviously it's not hurting that leather feel of the boot in any way. So that's really good.
No, I think it makes sense, right? Because you want to have in the heel area, you want enough structure to where you feel supported, and you also feel like your heel is being locked in place. Because if it's too soft, you're not going to have proper lockdown. But you want the edges to be at least somewhat forgiving. And for me, especially that back heel tab on the Neo, as much as I've always liked the way that it looked, the fact that it was made out of this stiffer synthetic material never really made a lot of sense to me. And I did, over the years, from wearing different variations of the Neo, once in a while, and it wasn't kind of a random thing, but you would end up getting this little bit of rubbing because of it being there. And now that it's just a little soft knitted thing, I guess you could argue it doesn't need to be there in the first place, but it's kind of like, it's kind of a signature aspect of the silhouette of the Neo at this point in time. And I kind of like that they put it there in knitted form. I don't know. It's one of the visually distinctive aspects of that boot. So I'm glad that it's there. But I think what's more interesting to me than that is the way that collar area transitions across the top of the foot, because they have completely gone away with, I guess, a more traditional design with just a central tongue and a central lacing system. And they've replaced that for what is now a one-piece upper, which I'm sure they're going to be like die-hard Mizuno fans, maybe a little bit unhappy with that change. And as much as I like a traditional tongue, I think that this, given how football boots have evolved in the materials that they're now using, what they've done there just makes sense.
I agree. Like there's no denying that from a general standpoint, at least in my opinion, and tell me if you disagree, but for me, there's no denying that when you have a knitted collar, at least just the top part of the collar, you have this like ankle sock type of construction around the ankle. It just moves more freely. It transitions better into the foot. There's less stuff squeezing your foot in a way it's not supposed to. So it feels more natural. It feels more like it's moving obviously with the foot, and I really like that. Another thing they did to the heel that I like is it feels like it's hugging. It's been made tighter, so it's actually locking in the heel a little tighter. Maybe because feels like there's a bit more foam, and also because they moved the seam where the upper is kind of stitched together to it itself. Really has been moved further back. So now instead of being slightly more on the side, they've actually taken it all the way back, and that means that it grabs a little tighter around the heel. And I somehow felt that my heel got better locked down in these compared to the 2s and the Betas. And that for me is something that's very, very essential. When you have a boot like this, where the focus is non-lockdown necessarily, and it can still give you that was a big step forward for me at least.
Yeah, no, they have to be comfortable. They have to fit properly. And I think that Mizuno, they nailed it. Because again, it's not like the Neo 2 didn't fit well already, but given the changes that they've made, they've arguably improved the fit, which is pretty much all you can ask for with a new model.
Now, then, of course, there's also the outsole, and a lot has gone into the outsole. You know, they worked on the rigidity of the midfoot, made a new like pattern on the inside. It's like a honeycomb-like pattern because it makes them able to make keep the rigidity but make the sole lighter. They changed the composition of the studs so they're now a little bit more durable. They changed the angle of the studs so they're a little bit more vertical to make it more stable apparently. And tons of stuff being worked on in the outsole. What I really like is the durability of the studs. That has improved because that means you can also wear it on AG without absolutely trashing them. And for me, I didn't really feel a difference except for the outsole where, the forefoot is still really, really nice and flexible. That's what you need. But somehow I felt it was a little stiffer, a little more responsive, and that would be what I'm looking for. I'm still mad about no plated studs, but I guess that's we want more of these. It is what it is, but that's probably never going to change on the Neo.
Yeah. I think there are more changes done than what you see at first glance, because I think to the average person that just looks like, hey, they added a new pattern on the heel counter and through the midfoot, and that's about it. But it's structurally a little bit different. They did add some stiffness through the midfoot, which is somewhat noticeable, I would say, with the boots, and then changing the angle of the studs ever so slightly. Again, very minor thing. I know there were people like you asking for bladed studs, and I agree with that to a point. I think Mizuno has actually done some really good bladed stud patterns in the past, so we know that they're fully capable of it. But at the same time, I don't blame them for sticking with that, because again, it's kind of like the identity of that boot at this point in time.
Yeah.
And while something more aggressive would have been maybe okay, I also don't think that that's a stud pattern that's lacking in aggression, despite it having a very traditional look.
Oh.
So I'm sure at some point on this podcast, I've probably made the comment that I'd like to see a bladed stud pattern too. But honestly, I'm not mad at that stud pattern.
Look, you're allowed to change your opinion. I mean, it doesn't, opinions change over time. And I would be able to accept the argument that, this is now made to amplify that barefoot feel. Obviously you want it to be lightweight, close to the ball and stuff, but, do you want something that's overly aggressive, or do you just want it to be like a smooth, comfortable movement through the ground? And if that's the feel Mizuno are going for, then I can accept this. But personally, I just want to wear this with a more aggressive outsole. I'd really like that. That'd be awesome. Someday.
Let me say this much, Jay. I think we've had it we've been brainwashed slightly by some of these big brands because you look at something like a mercurial stud pattern, and there's no denying that the FG version of that boot, it feels like you have more grip and there's more bite and you can push off that much harder.
Definitely.
In comparison to pretty much any other stud pattern that's available right now. But then if you look at a guy like Neymar, who is incredibly agile.
Yeah.
Incredibly quick.
Yeah.
And what's he playing in? He's playing in the AG version of the boot, which is basically just rounded kind of traditional studs, right? And there are other examples of players that are extremely agile that play with just simple rounded stud patterns. So I know it's been programmed in our head that we need these blades to be as to have as much grip as possible and to gain that advantage when it comes to traction. But I don't know that in reality that's necessarily what you need.
No, I understand where you're going, and again, it comes back to the idea about no boot will make you better. I think it's all about how you feel, and when I'm coming straight out of the vapor and into this, I don't feel like I'm getting slower out the block, but I just feel like I'd like to have a little bit more. Do you know what I mean?
See, Jay, this is the two circles. Remember, I said this earlier. The two circles, they're very different. There's not a huge central section of people that are going to be like,
yeah, okay,
they're different boots.
I'll give it to you. Okay, fair enough. But that's also the thing I wanted to come back to. That maybe we're not looking at the Neo 3 Betas in the right way. Maybe they're not supposed to be considered as a speed boot anymore, but they're supposed to be, for people who just want that barefoot feel. I mean, is it the best speed boot on the market? I would argue no. It's perhaps the closest thing we have to competing with the Vapor, but in terms of feeling fast and hardcore speed-ish, it doesn't really compete with the Vapor because the Vapor just feels tighter and more locked in and more responsive. But would I, if we look at boots in general and the pleasure and enjoyment of wearing boots, I would I would choose these. I'd be as happy as wearing these as I would with the Vapor.
Yeah.
Without the question of it.
I really appreciate what Mizuno is doing with the evolution of this line. Because if you look at almost any line of football boots or the history of any brand, what happened to the Predator? It changed into something that people were eventually unhappy with because they were changing things, trying to appeal to a newer audience or gain some kind of new interest. Same thing with Mercurial, right? You are a big fan of the Mercurial Vapor 11, and I'm sure you weren't particularly pleased when the Vapor 12 and the Superfly 6 came out. Good boots, but completely different direction. Absolutely. And changed the identity of what had made the Mercurial up until that point, right? So what I think is cool about the Morelia Neo 3 and the reason why it's difficult to compare to other boots out there right now is because it's a style of football boot that at one point in time, there were alternatives. Like in 2010, the F50 Adizero, the original one came out, and you could argue the leather version of that boot was just as good, a little bit better, a little bit worse, depending on what your opinion was in comparison to that original Neo, right? But over time, the F50 changed quite significantly, and now while I don't think we have a bad speed boot in the form of the X, it's not what we had before, where if 10 years ago you got a pair of Morelia Neos and you really liked them, for the last 10 years up until now, you've had the option of having something that is similar but slightly improved over time. And I like that about Mizuno because with these other brands, I feel like it's, hey, this is the best thing right now and forget about everything we did before, even though there's elements of this new boot that completely contradict what we said was good 10 years ago. That's what I like about Mizuno. I feel like they're a brand that's focused on, we know what our consumer wants and we give them exactly that. We don't try to trick them and sell them on this concept that's not really truly benefiting performance.
Preach. That was very, very well said. So to sum up the betas, I like what they've done. I think this is going to make every player who's ever worn a pair of Morelia Neos very happy. I think it's an improvement in more or less every way because it feels the same, but it fits better. It fits better. It's more natural to your foot. It still gives you everything you loved about the previous Morelia Neos, but it's just a better football boot. And I think they've also made it more accessible to people who wouldn't necessarily have worn a Morelia Neo before. And that to me is true progress. It's the same boot, but it's just better. And that's something we don't see enough of out there. What's important though? What's important, and we need to mention this, that you need to go down half a size. I don't know what they did. Maybe it's the new last, but go down half a size to get the best possible fit. Because otherwise, there's going to be a little bit of room in the toe. So I'm actually down to a size UK 5.5 now. That's a US 6.5. It's like baby sizes.
Oh man. Can I also just make a comment? I really like the look of the heel counter. I know it's a very little thing, but it kind of reminds me of like the Wave Ignitus heel counter a little bit.
Yeah, I know you were going to say.
And also kind of a little bit of like the little mini heel counter on the lateral side of the T90 Laser 3.
Solid, yeah. That's a good comparison. Didn't think of that.
Kind of reminds me of that.
I knew you were going to say Wave Ignitus.
Yeah, which I like. Yeah. I don't know. I like that. I know that there's people that absolutely hate the way that Mizuno boots look, which I don't know that I agree with your opinion very much. But for me, I like the fact that it's still, if you didn't know it was the new Morelia Neo, you probably would just say, oh, that's the same Neo that I've seen for the last 10 years. And I like that aspect of it.
I agree. And it's a clean look. Very clean look. And let me put it this way, there's going to be a lot of other cool colorways coming out for this. They've done a good job. Anyways, that was the Mizuno Morelia Neo 3 Japan Beta. It's a very long name, but as always, you can get it, and it's just 300 euros. It's 300 euros for one of the finest, best engineered, most durable boots you can find out there. 300 euros, and we of course have it on unisportstore.com. Shameless plug. We also have the Morelia Zeros if you want those instead. But Josh, it's time for some questions. And because we were told that people liked the fact that we had a lot of questions last time, we've also got quite a few this time around. So let's just get right into it. But before we do that, if you have any questions you'd like us to answer or any comments around the new Mizuno Morelia Neo 3s, leave them in the comment section right down below and we will try to get back to you. But the first question here is from Joe Giola. JayMike, that's a funny one because I messed up last time, and Canadian Jolter. Where do you think New Balance is going to go in the future? What do you think their standout / bespoke technology or marketing appeal could be? It seems like both the Furon and the Tequila are just following the concept of the Mercurial and the Ace and the Predator. And funny thing, I actually had a discussion with a few other boot nerds the other day about the exact same thing. Like the Furon is a very, very good football boot, but isn't it just following the lines of the Mercurial? And again, the Tequila 3, I mean, A16, 17 plus spread, like, what's the...
It's a tough... Look, if you're not Nike, Adidas, or Puma, I think that you have a tough task to try and create a popular pair of football boots. And while New Balance is not a small brand by any means, they have brand recognition. If you say New Balance, whether or not you think football boots is one thing, but everyone knows what New Balance is and what they do, and that they're a very capable brand, especially when it comes to running shoes and sneakers. For me, what was interesting about them for basically since they took over for Warrior, and what I think Warrior to a certain point did pretty well is that they tried to do something that was genuinely different than everybody else. And New Balance, when they launched with the original Vizaro and the original Furon, the original Vizaro had some Hypervenom Phantom 1 elements, but it was still a different boot and overall pretty good. Furon, disaster.
Yeah.
But then after that point, while none of the boots New Balance were making were honestly very good, some of them were genuinely very bad, at least they were trying to do something different versus everybody else. It was just a matter of getting it right eventually. But now you're right. Kind of what they have with the Furon, while I think it's their best boot by a mile.
I agree.
That they've done so far.
Yep.
It's kind of copy paste or a variation of what the Mercurial is doing. And I think it's always going to be a tough sell for them, for people to choose that over a Mercurial. And then what they've done here with this new laceless boot, it's an okay laceless boot. I don't think that it's any better or worse than other laceless options out there, especially if you're looking for something with a knitted upper. But there's genuinely nothing about that feels unique. Like it just feels like a copy paste of what we've seen before several times over the last 4 years in the era of laceless football boots. So I don't know. From New Balance, what I would like to see, because I know they're very capable of it, is they have all these proprietary technologies, and walk into a New Balance store and check out the running shoes they have. It's some really cool stuff.
It's very impressive.
We don't see any of that in the football boots, and I still don't understand why.
And the funny thing is they're working a lot with all these this 3D printing, building texture into boots like this. And I actually like what they've done with the kinetic stitch on the Tequila. But as you say, it just doesn't feel New Balance-y enough. It doesn't feel unique enough. I'd rather have preferred if they'd actually taken the base idea around the Tequila 3 and, applied it to let's say what they were doing with the Tequila 1s to like we just talked about with Mizuno, to actually keep the DNA of that boot, which was, in my opinion at least, a very decent football boot. It just feels like they're doing this with the Tequila 3 for the sake of doing something, going laceless, trying to make a big statement, but actually it would probably have been better for the boot if we'd also had something closer to the lines of the original. And as you say, it's not a bad football boot. Do I have reservations about, the stiffness and the way, mainly the stiffness, but yeah, I absolutely do. But again, it's not bad. And the same thing you can say for the Furon. It's actually a really, as you said, the best boot they've ever made.
Yeah.
By far. But it's also like, if you have a Mercurial and a Furon in your hand, what are you going to go for? Well, most people are probably going to go for the Mercurial. Would I be more or less as happy wearing a Furon as a Mercurial? I'd rather take the Mercurial, but yes. But therein lies their problem. Like, what is the New Balance USP compared to the big two, big three out there? I don't see it. Like Puma, they have their future. That's something very unique to them with the NetFit system and what they're doing with it in general. It doesn't feel like anything else out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. For me, I always look at, if you're not one of the three big brands, I think that your approach in an attempt to sell boots has to be very business focused. And I think that it's pretty obvious, if you're familiar with the industry, that there are only certain things that you can do being outside of those big brands in order to sell boots. Because if your attempt is hype, which I think is what New Balance is trying to do with these new models, it's not going to work. You might have hype for like 6 hours, but that's about all the hype you're going to be able to maintain long term on literally any product, if it's going to be priced at the same price point as what your alternatives are from Nike, Adidas, Puma. And I know that technically these are cheaper laceless boots than the Adidas ones, and the Furon is technically a cheaper speed boot than a Mercurial Vapor or a Superfly, but you're still over $200. Like, it's still, it's not far enough away. So for me, for New Balance, what I would do if I was put in charge is I would try to make football boots, either one or two models that were genuinely something different than what everybody else has on offer, and try to sell people on that concept. Second thing I would do, and this is something I don't think New Balance would be willing to do, because I still think they view themselves as like a top dog in the footwear industry, is they'd have to price them significantly lower. They should be $150 max. So now you're offering a great quality product that's genuinely different than everybody else, and you're cheaper. So now there's like incentive to buy New Balance boots. Because right now, what's your incentive? Buy a New Balance boot over a Nike boot that you probably want more. It's just, most people are not going to do that. So I don't know. It's a tough industry to be outside of the big three brands, but I just don't think that their approach as of right now, while the boots are probably better than they ever have been across the board, it's not a recipe for success the way it's currently laid out.
No, and look at Puma. Puma are giving you ridiculous value for money for 200 euros. 200 euros. And I know the Furon is like 220 euros and the Tequila is 240. Yes, I'm checking on our website. I don't know them by. And it's not like it's not a lot, but there's just some psychological thing when it's just 200 euros. Like when you give, again, they're not bad football boots, but if they were priced a little bit lower, more like around the Puma pricing, who knows? Like you get a very strong Vapor alternative in the Furon, 200 euros. Boom, who wouldn't take it?
Yeah, you're right. And they have to realize that as a brand outside of the big three, you have one chance. So like, for example, this new laceless boot comes out. Oh, that's pretty cool. Clicks to the Unisport store, 230 euros. I don't care anymore. Right? And then never going to look at that boot again. Never. That's it. That was your one shot and you blew it because the boots are too expensive. And it's not that they're not cheaper than what you're competing against, but there's a limit there.
Yep.
Because you're selling people on an alternative product to one that they actually really want. That's the thing.
And maybe the approach should not be to just try and make the same stuff as people want from other brands. Because, unless you make something that's genuinely better, a lot better, then are they going to come to you, or are they going to go to the brand that, set the tone with with laceless boots? Let's look at Adidas. They've really set the tone with the Copa and the Pret. They're genuinely very, very good laceless boots. And it's just like, if New Balance really wanted to make a splash and create the hype around it, they would have had to make a significantly better laceless boot. And as good as the Tequila is, I don't think they've done that.
Yeah, you're right. It's one of those things, like, if you really want the iPhone, you're probably going to buy the iPhone.
Exactly.
If you really want a Ferrari, then nothing's going to do except that Ferrari.
Except so for if Fiat comes out and, they make a significantly cheaper model that is as good or better than the Ferrari.
Right. You do. There are those instances. You have to sell people on, if you're going to offer an alternative, I really feel like the number one way to sell people on that alternative is based on pricing.
Or if you make a product that's so unique and so good that you can actually justify and just say, look, ours is just the best. There's no arguing. It's also more expensive, but if you understand, if you know, then this is for you. And I think
that's where Mizuno's different, though, because I think Mizuno is, out of every football boot brand, nobody has that reputation.
True. True.
And
they've also built
their
that
success
since,
and
like,
popularity and justification for price is based on that reputation.
but they've built that for like 35 years, and
Yeah.
and they've stuck to their core DNA. And maybe that's my problem with New Balance, is maybe they haven't found exactly where they want to be. I maybe thought that with the Tequila, that was a fresh start and it was really exciting direction, but now they've gone away from that. And that's a bit of a shame because it was a good product.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, that was a long discussion. St. Leopold, we've seen Özil playing in the Pred Accelerators and Ivan Rakitic in the Adipure 4s. And of course, there's Tony Kroos. What is about boots from the past that set them apart from the current boots? And JayMike, do you prefer the Adipure 4 SLs or the 11 Pro 2 SLs? Right. So what is it with the old boots that make pro players want to wear them instead of the new boots?
I think it's associated memories. I think it's a bit of a nostalgia.
Yeah, I agree.
For a lot of these guys. Like, I don't know. I think that's cool. I don't have a problem with any of them doing that. I do that myself from time to time. It's I think you said this in the podcast already once, but it's the player, not so much the boots. So
still,
look, as long as they make you happy and they get the job done, they get the job done.
Absolutely. But the funny thing is when I go out in my, let's say, heritage boots, like the older boots, older models, let's say 5 years plus old, then I often realize that, with a very few exceptions, that, right, football boots have come a long way. The new models are actually a lot better. I enjoy wearing them because, it brings back memories and it's a lot of nostalgia. And it's the reason I got into football boots in the first place. But it's just, I probably wouldn't take I take the Hypervenom 1s into battle, but probably my Adipure 4s, the regular version, I probably wouldn't. Adipure 1s, no way.
Yeah,
or maybe that's
for sure. There's been some serious evolution.
Yeah. But anyway, Adipure 4 SL versus 11 Pro 2 SL. I would have sworn I'd never change out of the 4 SLs, but the 11 Pro 2s, the SLs have made me change my mind. I like them more because they feel more rounded. They simply feel more stable and comfortable. So I'd have to go with those.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And maybe unpopular opinion, you might hate me for this. I always thought the shape of the Adipure 4 SL was weird. Or was Adipure 2 SL? 4 SL?
4 SL.
Yeah, I thought the shape was always off for me.
Right, next question. Hey, Josh and JayMike, I live in California and I want the Mizunos. I understand why, but I can't get them in any retailer here in the US. If I purchase them from Unisport, would they be able to get shipped? I have my eye on the new Regulars since I'm not a fan of the new Legends, long-time Legend user, and it's something we've talked about a lot, that the Regulars are, they're generally a very nice alternative to the Legends, but I thought I'd take the question and kind of also ask you. I'm pretty sure we ship to California. There's this rule though about, you're not allowed to buy K-leather boots or import them into California. Do you know more?
Yeah, it's basically been outlawed there.
Wow. So it's illegal. It's illegal to wear or to buy K-leather boots?
No. It's you can have it, you can wear it. You're not going to get arrested for that.
Okay.
Don't worry about that. It's just it's not allowed. Like if you owned a store, in California, you're not allowed to sell kangaroo leather products of any kind, whether they're football boots or purses or whatever else.
Gotcha.
They make kangaroo suit made out of real kangaroo skin.
That would be awesome.
Not allowed.
So in other words, I'm pretty sure we ship to California, and I would also not assume it to be a problem. But I would probably reach out to the Unisport store customer service. They're pretty awesome, and they know all this stuff better than I do. I'm just a resident boot nerd, so I would double check with them. But I definitely think it's possible, and I can only give my warmest recommendations to the Regulars.
Yeah, I would think that's okay too. I think you can ship in whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that if a store in the U.S. is allowed to ship there because they technically have to abide by U.S. laws.
Gotcha.
But
I
don't
guess
think
when
guys have to.
when the customs guys see the Unisport logo, after all, it is recognized and loved all over the world. I guess they just like, yep, clear it, move along.
They open up the box. Oh, look at that beautiful green string bag.
Yeah, you might lose your string bag though. That might be the price, but yeah, that's the way it goes. They're very popular. But shameless plugs aside, there's a question from Levi Winter. What color Vapor 13s would you rather have? The new lights, the neighborhood, the Future Lab 2, or the Future DNA? Because Levi's new lights boots have torn, and I want to get a new pair, and I'm really struggling to figure out what I'm going to swap them for. So Levi, thank you for putting your next boot choice in the hands of the boot nerds. We appreciate that. It's a big responsibility and something we don't take lightly. So Josh, let's decide here. Let's huddle.
Okay, so it was Future DNA, neighborhood, and what was the third option?
Future Lab 2. So the white ones.
Future Lab 2, which are the pink ones. Yeah.
Oh, the Future, yeah, of course, Future. But Future Lab 2, I think he means from the lab. So the white ones. You can also go with Future Lab, the pink ones. So there's Future Lab.
Okay, yeah.
This is the pink ones, and the From the Lab, which is the Future Lab 2. It's a little bit confusing, yeah. But we can also include the Future Labs and the From the Lab white ones, just because.
Okay. I will say I just got the neighborhood pack boots in like a week ago. They're really cool in person.
Yeah.
They look 100 times better in person than they look in any pictures that I've seen.
Yeah.
Like pictures, that is one colorway where pictures do not do it justice. So if you're a fan of like chrome boots,
except if you
and
go
like little
to,
details,
yeah.
Except if you go to where?
Instagram.com/JayMikeDK. Shameless plug.
Oh yes, extremely high fidelity.
What am I doing in this episode? I'm just just turning into a walking commercial. I'm sorry, guys. Anyways,
so
but
those
yeah,
are
they're
really cool. They're really cool. They're cool because they're kind of flashy, but they're also somewhat subtle, which I like about them.
Yeah.
But if I was picking for myself, I would have to go Future DNA.
Yeah,
just based on nostalgia factor.
Look,
I think they're so cool.
If you can get your hands on the Future DNAs, because they were limited and they were difficult to get your hands on after the first week. If you can, get them. Just for nostalgia reasons. I think they're also some of the best looking materials we've seen in 2020, maybe alongside the Safaris. If you can't get the Future DNAs, I would probably go for the neighborhoods.
Yeah,
I think
I would agree with that. That's my order of importance.
All the Safaris.
Safaris are cool too, though. I wouldn't pass on those.
Yeah, exactly. So Future DNAs, I'd probably say if we count the Safaris, I would say Future DNA, Safaris, neighborhood. That's the order.
Okay. Well, I agree with that list.
Oh, nice. Last question here from John Mead. Which boots in mind, like the Puma V815 Ferraris and the Adidas Porsche, exactly, English, that's very difficult. Adidas Porsche design sport boots, you remember those? They were kind of weird looking on the, was it the X15 plate? Anyway, is there a car company that you would like to see collaborate with a football boot brand such as Nike or Mizuno in the future? Now, if I'm not 100% mistaken, BMW also made a collaboration with Puma on some Evo Speeds back in the day.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they release or they just like show
they released.
Oh, I don't remember seeing that. Okay, well, just on that topic, I know that Mizuno, because I remember seeing them in a magazine or something, or maybe it was on. No, I was on the Lamborghini merchandise website. Just because it's very fun to go to these places, like go to the Ferrari merch website, and I just like to go to high to low and see some of the ridiculously priced items and how much you could possibly pay for like something that seems so unnecessary. Wow. But I was on the Lamborghini one.
We spend our spare time on vastly different things, my man.
Well, I find that I always like any website that's like, well, how did I end up here? High to low, see what the most expensive stuff is. I like doing that. But on the Lamborghini website, they had the Mizuno. What's the model called that just has like the hollow midsole? You know what I'm talking about?
No?
The running model from Mizuno. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, yeah.
It looks very futuristic. But anyways, there was like a couple different colorways of those, and they just had the Lamborghini badge on the heel. So it was technically a co-branded Mizuno Lamborghini product, which I thought was very cool. They were like 350 euros or something like that. So I ultimately did not end up buying a pair because I was never going to wear them. But
you thinking of those Prophecy shoes?
Wave Prophecy, I think is what it is. Yeah.
Oh, looks ridiculous. Futuristic, let's say that.
Yeah,
wow,
Wave
okay.
Prophecy.
Lamborghini. Okay, that's
Yeah, they exist. Okay, it's on the tongue. They're kind of I don't think they're very good looking, to be honest.
But being a Lamborghini owner, I mean, you have to get a pair. You have to get
They do exist.
So Mizuno, if you're watching this, please hook your boy up. And I mean Josh.
That would be cool.
That'd be cool.
Like that, if they have that licensing deal in place, then they should absolutely do a Lamborghini Mizuno football boot. That would be excellent.
And now we're talking like a Lamborghini Neo. That would be hella cool.
That'd be sweet, right?
Wow. Okay.
Because I mean, I'm surprised, honestly, that Puma doesn't do more Ferrari football boots because it's such a huge partnership and it's been around for such a long time. It's from a marketing perspective, it just seems like such a good idea.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just not sure why. Like, there should be one every year, if not multiple a year.
That V1 815 was absolutely amazing. Wait, I have it. Okay, so keep talking. Yeah, keep talking. I'll find it. Just to show people because it's nice.
Yeah, no, they are really cool. But it just seems like one of those things. Like, if the objective of your brand is to sell as many football boots as possible and generate interest, while I think a lot of people watching this podcast know that the limited edition stuff, because they make so few of them, they're pretty expensive to produce and they ultimately don't end up making that much money, but they drive a lot of interest. And I think that the Ferrari brand and fan base, there's a lot of crossover into football boots, obviously, but there's just so many people that would want that type of thing. So I'm not sure why they don't do it more often. Jay is current. For those that are listening to the podcast, JayMike has just left and he's in the Unisport room where you guys see him recording the videos. And what you don't see, I'm not sure if you've ever done a tour, but what he's facing is like a whole rack, like rows of boots in boxes. So he's currently sifting through all of that, trying to find the boots that he wants to show you guys. He's clearly not doing a great job because it's taking him a long time. But as far as like other collaborations with car brands are concerned, the thing is that Puma has so many like brand deals with a lot of these car companies like BMW, like Red Bull Racing is another one that would probably be a pretty cool collaboration to have like a Red Bull Puma football boot thing. That I think that could be really interesting as well as a color combination. Just the Red Bull colors would be really interesting. Man, it's really hard. I'll say this much. It's very difficult doing a podcast on your own. So I'm really hoping that JayMike comes back very soon. I'm just, for those that, a lot of people ask how we do this podcast. We are basically doing like a FaceTime call. So I have my phone right in front of me right here. And I am just watching the front. Oh, there he is. I'm watching the front facing camera and that's how we communicate to each other. Success.
Yeah, I just knocked over a bunch of stuff when I had to pull the giant box out of the shelf. But this is what they look like. Absolutely beautiful. You know, it's a good looking model and, you know, the gold trim and it's just, yeah, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. I don't actually have my pair anymore.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So I had a pair and then, you know, over the years you meet some people and I met some guys where we hang out and they have this like huge like Ferrari shrine of just like all this memorabilia. And I just have them in my collection, just sitting in a box. So I felt it was fitting for those to live in that environment. So I gifted them to live in the Ferrari shrine amongst all the other random Ferrari items.
Good guy. Good guy.
I get to see them whenever I visit,
nice.
But I don't have them in my possession anymore.
Fair enough. What the car brand I would like to see collaborating with a football boot brand would probably be Aston Martin with I don't care who. But maybe Mizuno, that would be nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Mizuno one is a cool thing. And also, I was saying Puma has the partnership with Red Bull Racing. I think a Red Bull, we technically did get like remember that Red Bull looking colorway of the V108? Remember those? It was like blue and then it had like silver overlays. And I think the thing was like yellow and red.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember.
I don't think it was like officially Red Bull branded, but I think that the Red Bull color combination and the Red Bull Racing logo could be pretty cool on a football boot.
Yeah. Slap it on the future and be like, yep, that wouldn't be bad. But Aston Martin, Mizuno, make it happen, please. Someone make it happen. I'm going to buy him. And on that bombshell, I think it's time that we, Mizuno, if you make those Lamborghini boots, we'll take 10%, and please send at least Josh a pair, and make something. They should make more car company collaborations, right? It's like it's
absolutely,
would be a little bit easy for them to just, yeah.
It's such a good, like, the football boots have become so focused on tech, which is kind of what cars have been focused on now. It makes sense to collaborate and have those design aspects come together on a single product. And I think there's a lot of crossover there and people get excited about that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, Lotto could go in and collaborate with Alfa Romeo or something. That would be pretty cool too.
It would be cool for sure.
Yeah. So there you go. You could get like some custom seats for your Alpha with like a Lotto logo. I'm just brainstorming. I'll take 10%. It's cool, guys. Here are all the free ideas. And on that bombshell, I think it's time that we end episode 72 of the Boot Nerds podcast. Now, if you have any comments or questions in regards to the Mizuno Morelia Neo 3 Japan betas, I said it right this time. Leave them in the comment section right down below. We'll get back to you with an answer in the next couple of episodes. Of course, you can go and buy the boots on unisportstore.com right now. Shameless plug. And if you want to see more on the coming boots, you can go and subscribe to Josh's channel over by his face. You can see what we're up to at Unisport, including a review of the new Mizuno boots. And of course, don't forget to go subscribe to the best boot podcast on YouTube by clicking the white circle in the middle of the screen. And with that said, I've been JayMike, and I approve this message. Ciao.
Later.